Welcome to Grow Bio channel. In today's video, we're gonna see about mitochondria. Mitochondria, mitos in Greek means thread and chondros in Greek means granules. It is brownish red in color. Imagine if you have no melanin in our body, then we will look like brownish red in color because it is only colored organelle present in our body. And its size ranges from 0.5 to 1 microns, very small in size, and they self-divide when needed. It supports Dr. Margulis' endosymbiotic theory. At first, there is no oxygen, so only anaerobic organisms were present. When anaerobic bacteria or archaea when ingested other organism, the organism somehow survive within the anaerobic archaea or bacteria, and they develop symbiotic relationship within them. Thus, it creates the greater advantage for that organism because it can survive in the aerobic environment. If one glucose is given to anaerobic bacteria, it can produce only 2 ATPs. Whereas, if it is given to aerobic organism, the mitochondria will able to produce 32 ATP per glucose. So, it provides greater advantage and it is present both in plants and animals. And now we can see about mitochondria. Mitochondria is called as powerhouse of the cell or power plant of the cell. It can be called as digestive system in our body because it utilizes the nutrients and oxygen to produce the energy, and it is the larger organelle. Except the nucleus, chloroplast and vacuole, it is considered as the larger organelle. As we have organs in our body, the cell have the organelles. Organelles means small organs. The mitochondria occupies about 25% in the cytoplasm because of its size, because it is the larger one and it occupies 25% in eukaryotes. And mitochondria is irregular in shape, mostly sausage shaped, granular, rod, spherical, thread, etc. Of course, it is based on the cell and cell cycle. And here you can see the mitochondria. It has outer membrane, intermembrane space, inner membrane, and the folding space is known as cristae. And it has mitochondrial DNA, and it has granules for the storage purpose, and cytoplasmic matrix where more enzymes are there, and it also has ribosomes. Because it has DNA and ribosome, it can self-replicate. Now we can see about this one by one. First we can see about outer membrane. Outer membrane. Outer membrane is the semi-permeable membrane and it is made up of phospholipid and proteins. It has porins for transport of ions, ATP, ADP, nutrients, etc. As the cells have marker, the organelles also have histochemical markers. The outer membrane has monoamine oxidase as the histochemical marker. And now we can see about intermembrane space. Intermembrane space, the space between the outer and inner membrane is known as intermembrane space. So here the hydrogen is stored and creates gradient, and its function is oxidative phosphorylation and electron transport chain. That is, it acts as the helper. And next we're gonna see about inner membrane. Inner membrane. It is the complex permeable membrane and it allows oxygen, carbon dioxide, water, etc. And its histochemical marker is cytochrome oxidase. It is made up of electron transport system, ATP synthase complex, transmembrane proteins, etc. So when the hydrogen is present in intermembrane space, 4 hydrogen will be drawn towards the complex 5 of inner membrane, and then it produces 1 ATP for 4 hydrogens. Next we can see about cristae. Cristae is the folded structure which increases the surface area. It gives room for working of mitochondria. Next we're gonna see about mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA, it is also known as mitoDNA or mtDNA. It is the gene that is found only in the mitochondria. Nearly 37 gene which is responsible for cell respiration and enormous function, and it is of 16,500 DNA of total 25,000. So nearly 37 gene of 25,000 gene is present in the mitochondria. And yeast have more base pair than the animal mtDNA. That is, it consists of more introns than exons. so the yeast have more base pairs. Next, we can see about cytoplasmic matrix of the mitochondria. The matrix, that is inner side of intermembrane space and inner space. They have cytoplasmic enzyme which is needed for the TCA cycle. It is now also known as Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle, etc. The mitochondrial DNA, it is responsible for cellular aerobic respiration. Here they have dissolved gases, for example oxygen, carbon dioxide, because the mitochondria absorbs oxygen and nutrients to give the energy and carbon dioxide as base product. So the dissolved gases is present and recyclable intermediates are present. For example, it is used in energy shuttles and water, and it also has histochemical marker, the malate dehydrogenase. So the inner cytoplasmic matrix in turn helps in the TCA cycle. Next, we can see about functions of mitochondria. When we see about function, the first thing comes to our mind is like powerhouse of the cell and it produces ATP. Here I will give 10 points, the important function of mitochondria. First is neuron cell signaling. It is found ubiquitous in neuron cell. The muscle cell will have more mitochondria and the neuron cell also have some mitochondria in it. The brain consumes more energy. So the glucose and oxygen is turned to ATP, and it also helps in cell signaling, and it is also used in other biochemical reaction of the neuron. So the point here is it helps in ATP supply and also calcium handling in the neurons. And next is apoptosis. When calcium is overloaded, then synchronizable depolarization occurs. So when the calcium will be overloaded, the mitochondrial damage occurs, then the calcium will be overloaded, because mitochondria is responsible for calcium buffer system in our body. It maintains the calcium. When mitochondria is damaged, it means the cell is damaged. So synchronizable depolarization occurs. It produces reactive oxygen species. That is the molecule that is actively reacting towards the oxygen. For example, hydrogen. It produces hydrogen peroxide. So when the energy is low, that is mitochondria, it will not produce any energy when it is in damaged state. When the energy is low, it releases the pro-apoptotic factors, so that there will be oxidative damage to the mitochondrial DNA and lipids, etc., which in turn it results in aging or degeneration of the cell. So on mitochondrial damage, it leads to apoptosis. And next function is cell cycle control and monitor cell differentiation, cell growth and development. So here the mitochondria helps in G1 to S transition state. When mitochondria is damaged, then there will be low energy and it triggers AMP kinase and P53. So thus the cyclin E, there will be no production of cyclin E. So thus the no transition occurring in the cell. So here when cyclin E is not produced, then the transition will not occur. So the triggering factor AMPK and P53 is responsible for that, which is triggered when no energy or low energy is there. So here is the checkpoint. So when mitochondria is damaged, then the cell will not enter to S phase. And next is calcium homeostasis. Mitochondria associated membrane, it controls cellular homeostasis in non-transformable cell, that is normal cell. Thus, alteration in the calcium, it will lead to cancer. And next, regulation of innate immunity. Immunity becomes high when PAMP and DAMP is produced, that is pathogen associated molecular pattern which is present in the pathogen and damage associated molecular pattern which will be present in the damaged cell mitochondria. When DAMP is produced by the mitochondrial damage, then what happens? The mitochondrial secretion will be out. The mitochondrial DNA, lipids will all be out. So thus the PRR, that is pattern recognition receptor, recognize it and immunity is produced. Thus the phagocytosis will occur. The phagocytosis not only responsible for uptaking the pathogen, it is also responsible for uptaking the damaged cell debris, etc. And next function is stem cell regulation. Somatic stem cells as regeneration capability. On mitochondrial dysfunction, it means the cell is damaged, then the stem cell will lose the capability of regeneration because there will be no production of energy. The ROS, that is reactive oxygen species, will increase. So the respiratory chain will be dysfunctioned. The respiratory chain is present in the mitochondria, it will get dysfunctioned. Thus, due to oxidative stress, the degeneration or aging will occur in that cell. So it helps in stem cell regulation too. Next is trigger inflammatory response systemically. Systemically means to the whole body. Okay. On stress, calcium is produced more because the damage to the cell. They trigger NLRP3 inflammation. That is, it is produced on plasmodium diseases. On this inflammation, it triggers inflammatory response all over the body along with the cystic fibrosis. That is, mucus and other secretory molecules will get thickened by this. So it triggers the response systemically. And ETC, that is electron transport chain. The ETC occurs in the inner membrane folding, which has 5 complex to produce the ATP, which also includes the ATP synthase, that is the 5th complex. So mitochondria is also responsible for cellular respiration by producing ATP via ETC. And next is TCA, that is Krebs cycle, citric acid cycle, or TCA cycle. It is done in the cytoplasmic matrix of the mitochondria. So here it contains the enzyme for the Krebs cycle. When the oxygen and nutrient is grabbed into the inner mitochondrial membrane, then in the matrix they get converted to NADH and FADH molecules, and after producing such reduction molecule, they emit some electrons and then they return to the oxidative state. These electrons along with the protons, they in turn produce the ATP. These reactions occurs in the mitochondria. And next is oxidative phosphorylation, the process by which cells use enzymes to oxidize the nutrients, thus it releases the oxygen. The oxygen here acts as the electron acceptor, which is used to produce the ATP. Thus, the electron transport chain along with the chemiosmosis, that is ATP production. So, ETC and chemiosmosis make up the oxidative phosphorylation. Thus, the ETC and chemiosmosis together, it is called as oxidative phosphorylation. Now it's time for facts section. Mitochondria is 100% maternally inherited. Thanks to moms. Mom's mitochondria is inherited to all the person. Paternal mitochondria, that is dad's mitochondria, only function is the mobility of the sperms. So after it gets fused to the egg, it enters into the suicidal mechanism. That is, it is done by the gene CSP6. So when scientists delayed this CSP6 gene, what happened means it damaged the cell and the cell enters to apoptotic condition. And in some condition, it also causes pathological disease or some conditions. So mitochondria is maternally inherited. And thank you. If you have any doubt, please comment in the comment section below, subscribe and please press the bell button below. Thank you so much for listening.